Thank you once again. As you're enjoying your dinner, just want to give you a little brief history of Jemez and the community that you'll be visiting tomorrow, so that you have a better understanding, more in-depth understanding of the community that you're visiting and the feast day that you're participating in. So as I shared earlier, on the map where Jemez is located, we're 50 miles northwest of Albuquerque. We also had a sister tribe, Pecos, which was the only other tribe that spoke a similar dialect to Jemez. And so they're now a part of our Jemez community, and I'll share that a little bit as I do the overview and the history. And then they're located southeast of Santa Fe, so further up. The Jemez people, this is our ancestral homeland. As I shared earlier, we occupied the Jemez Mountain region and then the surrounding areas, and our people first moved into the area in the 1300s and established our villages there. And so the map that you see is an aerial shot of the Jemez Mountain region, and the ancestral homelands outlined in maroon, but the light blue are the current 3 parcels of reservation land that we have. They're non-contiguous, and they encompass a little over 89,600 acres of reservation land. So the one that you'll be visiting tomorrow is the one at the very bottom, which is the rectangular one, and that's where the village of Walatoa is. As I shared, the Jemez people migrated into the Jemez Mountain region in the 1300s. Our place of emergence we refer to as Walnatuta, and that is for us in what is today known as the Four Corners region, part of that Utah region. And our migration oral history brings us to the Jemez Mountain area and the Jemez Valley here. The Jemez people at that time, our people established 13 large villages at the time of contact on the mesa tops surrounding Redondo Peak, as I shared earlier, Walvima, which is our sacred mountain. And so the villages were strategically located to protect access and to protect the resources to help the people survive. And so those of you that are coming to the community tomorrow will see up into the valley and into the mountain areas, the ancestral homelands. Today, unfortunately, majority of our ancestral homelands and villages are on either private or federal national forest lands. So our first European contact was in the 1540s, and it was by the Spanish crown that came up through by way of Central America, Mexico. Through their records was where the number of villages that we occupied and that we have currently relations with were identified not only through our oral history but also through the records. And it was an estimated that around 30,000 people encompass the Jemez Mountain region in 13 large villages. Today we live in one village that you'll be visiting tomorrow. It's called Walatoa, and it roughly translates to "this is the place." So each village that was established by our people had a specific name that signifies or designates it. As I shared earlier in the map, the Pecos people were the only other tribe that spoke our Jemez dialect, Jemez Toa dialect. And in 1838, their remaining survivors moved in and were taken in by the Jemez people. The Pecos Pueblo was actually on the route from Mexico into Santa Fe. Santa Fe became the capital of Spain in the area here at that time. And so Pecos became a significant trading center where not only the cultures of coming into Santa Fe converged, but also it was on the eastern edge of the plains. So the plains people came, the people from the Pueblo tribes and the communities in the Rio Grande region and the surrounding areas, it became a major place of commerce, trade. And so that's what was its rise, but it was also its downfall, because with all the different peoples coming together, there was also disease, sickness, and then during conflict, warfare that impacted the population. And so in 1838, the last remaining survivors of the Pecos people asked to be taken in by Jemez. And so we celebrate their feast as well on August 2nd. And they brought with them one of their traditional societies, their leadership cane, which is recognized as our second lieutenant governor today, and then their Pecos Bull. So those are the things that continue to survive in Jemez of the Pecos people. As you got a glimpse earlier this morning, we are steadfast in maintaining our language, our culture and traditions, our traditional and ceremonial dances, some of which that you'll be exposed to tomorrow. And then also trying to maintain our culture and traditions through our food, our traditional arts, and then the attire to pass that knowledge on to our younger generations. In terms of our form of government, we have our traditional government, which are, in essence, our chiefs, or as the Spanish referred to them as our caciques, religious leaders. And for us, they are appointed for life. And so they serve the people from their time of appointment up until their death. And they help to maintain our traditional calendar, religious ceremonial events throughout the year. And earlier, as Regis shared, helping us to maintain the core values and those gifts of our Creator. And that's where the sovereignty of our governments lie, is within our traditional governance structure. And the caciques for us are an appointed, and I guess the best way to describe it is similar to the Dalai Lama, but it's not considered reincarnation. So it's a calling, it's a spiritual calling, and our spiritual leaders summons our ancestors, and that is how our leaders are selected to serve in the traditional leadership positions. But for our cacique and Jemez, they all come from the Corn clan. So the significance of corn, not only to our people, the surrounding pueblos in the Americas, is significant. So for Jemez, our caciques, our chiefs, all come from the corn lineage. And then your lineage comes from your mother and not your father. So it would be our chief and their sisters' sons who would be future chiefs in the lineage that we follow. Our secular government was introduced when the Spanish crown came as a way of communicating between our traditional government and the Western governments that were coming in. And so
the Native American Youth Empowerment Organization was founded in 1993 and was endorsed through a Jemez Tribal Council resolution in 1996. NIA serves as a support group for students ages 13 through 24 who are in middle school through college in their educational careers.
So the secular government is set up similar to the Spanish style of governance, with the governor, lieutenant governors,
while
we have the
emphasizing
sheriffs,
the
and then the
importance of
fiscales
upholding
are our
and
church
sustaining the
officials
cultural
who are
values,
liaisons between
language,
the
and
Catholic Church and the tribe. And today, the secular leadership is what has evolved into our tribal governments, which deals with everything outside of the traditional governance, with city, state, federal, international governments. And for us in Jemez, they're the buffer that protect the traditional governance and way of life that we have. And so we don't have a system of voting in Jemez, but our traditional leadership appoints our secular government. And a lot of the pueblos and tribes in New Mexico are set up that way, and there's some that have adopted a constitution established through the Indian Reorganization Act of the 1930s, and they have a voting system in place. And as shared earlier in the timeline that Regis shared, our initial contact with Spain was in the 1500s. So our interactions with the Spanish crown, the Catholic Church, all that spans over 400 years before we became a territory of the U.S. But before that, we were part of Mexico. And then after the Spanish-American War, became a territory of the U.S. and eventually statehood in 1912. So our time with the U.S. government has been brief, a little over 100 years, as opposed to our relationship with the Spanish crown. And so all that defines who we are and where we are in this place and how we function as a society, a traditional society in modern times. And so a lot of our issues with sovereignty, self-determination, our current status, also, so be it, our celebrations are defined by those very actions and interactions that we had, good and bad, with the different governments that we were in contact with. Here's just a brief slide on Pecos Pueblo. After the migration, Mexico entered into Pueblo Lands Act in the early 20s, where we had an original Spanish land grant, 18,000 acres that was given to the Pecos people, that Jemez continues to maintain now, not the entire 18,000, but what the Indian Pueblo Lands Act did was it opened up the lands that currently were actively being used by the Pecos people for homesteading. And so that's how the Pecos and Jemez lost a lot of the lands. But now officially Jemez is recognized working with Pecos through an act of Congress where Jemez and the Pecos people were merged to recognize that relationships in terms of more of the treaty, trust responsibilities, and such. And then just quickly, one of the things that you'll see a little bit in our discussions and the videos to follow is just how we're trying to maintain our language, culture, and traditions as with any indigenous or tribal community, not only in this country, but internationally, with modern technological advances and some of the things that we are also faced with in maintaining our traditions and cultures in a modern day where our children are influenced by technology, video, and everything else. Great, but also at times can be challenging. Current day Jemez, we have a population of just around 4,000 people. We have some very well-known artists. We are also known for our long-distance runners that are produced and really looking at maintaining our language and culture and traditions, but at the same time, looking to see what educational opportunities exist out there for our young people to be able to ensure that we are creating viable citizens to ensure that our people and our community survive long after we leave this earth. And now, San Diego Feast Day. Tomorrow. So as I shared a little bit that our relationship with the Spanish crown spans over 400 years. And as you know, they came here, there was a lot of conflict, a lot of warfare, there's times of peace and such. But as the relationships were established, all the Pueblo communities were provided a patron saint. So the patron saint that we're celebrating tomorrow is Saint San Diego. So this is part of that culmination of two different cultures coming together, where we're actually celebrating the feast of a Catholic saint, but have tied in our own traditional dances and practices with it. So it's a melding of cultures coming together over the years. And so that's what you'll see tomorrow. And the day will start off with a Catholic Mass at 9, and then there'll be a procession into the plaza. And there'll be a shrine set up at the west end of the plaza. And after that, then the traditional dances will begin. And the dancers will come out of our kivas, which are our ceremonial chambers. And that's significance of our emergence of our people from the underworld, coming up through the ladder and then down into the plaza to perform. So by the time you get there around 9:45, if you head straight to the plaza, you should be able to see the dancers before the first dance coming out of the kiva. Those are just some of the protocols. I don't know if I need to go through them, but we know that we're hosting you in families that have opened their homes. So tomorrow you will each get a map to the home that will be hosting you. And as Dr. Mack shared earlier, she'll be your point of contact. Most of us will be busy dancing, singing, or our ladies will be hosting and feeding in the homes. As shared there, our traditional dances are religious ceremonies and performances, so we ask that observance and how you observe our dances and performances be respected, and applause is not acceptable after the dances, but because those are prayers and blessings to each of you that we're giving tomorrow on behalf of not only our people, but for the good of everybody that comes to participate in our feast day, and also for the good and well-being of the world. Just quickly on the technology, any cell phones, cameras, or video taking is prohibited, along with sketching. If you do have your cell phone out around the plaza area, it will get taken away. So make sure you're cognizant of that, and if you need to use your phone, go a little off somewhere and hide you while you use it, because you will not get it back right away, and you might be traveling home without a phone. And so in terms of the protocol with the dances, that's what will be happening tomorrow. And then I couldn't find a modern day shot of our plaza since photographing is not allowed. So it's not only in the plaza and the dances, but it's in the village proper. But in the 1930s, it was allowed. Go figure. Anyway, so this is a picture of our plaza looking from east to west. So our plaza is rectangular. The shrine will be at the very west end of the plaza. And then the dancing will start right here on the east side and go down and back up. And so the places where you can actually cross the plaza are at the east end and the west end behind the shrine. And then there's places on the south side, one place where you can view in the middle, and there's a few places on the north side, but there's little alleyways that lead there. So you just have to kind of navigate yourself around the plaza, and there'll be limited vendors there tomorrow. I don't know if this has a pointer. Oops. This is one of the sample of the aerial map that you'll get tomorrow. And right in the middle is where you see the plaza. We got this off Google, so Google Maps. And you kind of see the black boxes around some of the houses. So most of the houses that are hosting you are around the plaza area, but we'll be giving you contact information, the house number. We do have street names, and then we've taken pictures of each of the front of the houses to try and help you navigate. So that's part of your challenge tomorrow, as well as enjoying the feast day, that you'll be able to try and navigate and find your host home and your family. I don't know if this has a pointer. But the plaza is right in the middle, and the vendors usually are on the streets around it. So that kind of gives you a sense of how things will be laid out tomorrow. But again, there'll be a limited number of vendors, not the full numbers that we have. This is a little larger aerial shot, and right in the middle, you see that kind of big rectangular building with the fence around it. So that's the church that was built there, and that's where the Mass will be happening. And your drop-off and pick-off point will be just to the south of that long Y that you see there. I don't have a point. So that's important to know, because that's where you'll be dropped off and that's where you'll be picked up, so you can make your flights and make it back here safely. But that's kind of a larger aerial view. But those are the maps that you'll get to help guide you tomorrow and to navigate the area. And as shared, Dr. Mack will be on site, a couple of our staff, and one of our community members will also be there to help. But wanted to just share this information so that you know what you'll be getting tomorrow in terms of the maps to help guide you. But just any questions before we get into the next section? Yes. Well, our feast, now that it's open, every feast is open to anyone and everyone. And so your particular delegation, we got specific approval from our leadership, because we had to coordinate with the homes to be able to provide you the feast day experience. Normally, you would just go to your friend's home or ever any homes, but also know that the home that you go to, if you're invited into another home, you're always welcome to go and eat at another home as well too. And it's all you can eat, but also know that our homes sometimes may have multiple people waiting to eat. So when you get to the table, it's not time to socialize, but get through the meal, and then the others can funnel in, because we just don't know. This is our first open event after 2 years of COVID being closed, so we just don't know how many people we are expecting. And so there's also, if there's any specific details, they'll be in the information tomorrow. A gift is not really required. I mean, they're not going to expect it because what we're sharing with you on our feast is our gift to you and everyone. But if it's something that you want to leave maybe from your organization, your home, or whatever, that's up to you, but it's not required and it's not expected. The vendors are usually artists from other tribal communities, so they may have jewelry, pottery, other types of arts, craft types. So it will just depend. It's good to have cash on hand, but I think these days some vendors usually have a little square too that they'll travel with. And then if you really want to, we just got word today that there's 2 food stands coming. So if you want to try a feast day burger, there's 2 food stands that will be there. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. You'll see some of us either participating, dancing, or singing, and then some of the other ones will be feeding the ladies in the homes. So feel free to engage with us in between as you see us, and we look forward to hosting you tomorrow.
Right away? Sure. Let's do it. We're coming up. Okay. Any of you who know me know that I can sometimes lapse into infomercial, but that's not all. So we're not done. We're going to have a quick conversation about the Jemez Pueblo, and you got the history from Kevin of the place. We just want to end with a little bit of the present and the beauty of what's going on there, and bring in another leader. So we have the great opportunity to have the brother of Kevin Shendo, Benny Shendo, join us. So I think the movie is going to be entitled The Fabulous Shendo Brothers, something like that. And we're just going to have a quick conversation, and I think we're going to, we'll end with the videos and just let them run, because we're running. So is that okay? Yeah. And if you want to really play one, tell me and we'll leave it in. We may have some videos too. So let me just say first, I'm very informal, as you know, but I want to honor these 2 amazing men. You've heard from Kevin. Here's what I'll say about Kevin. I think in the education reform world, I can only think of the 2 most important leaders I know of in that space. One is David Domenici, who's reinventing schools inside the justice system all over the country. The other one is Kevin Shendo. So I mentioned earlier today all of the innovative ways that he's been building upon the sovereignty that we heard about earlier today, and so I've had a great privilege of knowing him for many years, and he said it wasn't quite his plan, right? This morning, signed up for a year, and would you tell the tribal council it's been a long year, 20 years later? And that's how it works sometimes, but that level of commitment, that level of being in place, and the ways in which he's been able to transform education for and with his tribe, it's just really, it's hard to put into words the power of that, of what he's done. His brother, Benny, though he has a reputation for a great golf handicap, that's not all he's known for. He was the first Secretary of Education, right? The first one. Indian Affairs. First Secretary of Indian Affairs when that got elevated to a cabinet position. So Secretary Shendo, also an elected in the state legislature, representing not just his own people, but a lot of the Pueblo communities and all of New Mexico. He's been in myriad leadership roles in the tribe, and we're going to hear a little bit about that. So it's really just a privilege to have both of the two Shendo brothers with us here, and we'll just get into a little conversation and maybe share a little bit of video. I just want you to guys talk about the present. Like, we heard about the history, but it's a real opportunity to talk about. Let's start with the youth work back in the day. And this may be, either one of you can weigh in on this, but tell us about the time that Janet Reno came out, and then like what followed, what happened after that. Who wants to start? Kevin, Benny, you going to start?
I'll just say a few words. I want to thank my younger brother for the presentation. Now I know how I'm going to behave tomorrow when I go home. It's the first time I heard the presentation, and Secretary Warren and I looking at each other, and we saw the photograph, started laughing. But thank you again for the invitation to be here. Kind of hard to see out there, but it's fascinating work, and I think many of us never planned to do this kind of work. I know vividly when I was growing up, my mother was a teacher, my sister was another teacher, and they were always, unpaid, not paid, buying stuff. And I veered. I said, I'm never going to be in education. So I went straight to business school, law school. My plan was to be a corporate lawyer, be a millionaire, and do all these things because I don't want to be poor. And that's what my plan was. I got through business school. I did get into law school. After a year, I said, no, this is not it. And funny thing is, I got pulled back into nonprofit work with the gentleman that I had worked with, Norbert Hill, with the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. And that's what kind of shifted my life. And I ended up almost 20 years in higher education, and I had never planned. I didn't even know what an assistant dean of students or dean of student was growing up. I knew, that we could be firemen. I knew that we could be policemen. I knew that we could be carpenters. I knew that we could be welders. These things that people said that you could be. I never knew that I could have a career in higher education. And I enjoyed the work that I did. And so before I get into it, Kevin, and as Kevin mentioned, we come from, and I think both Kevin and I are very lucky. Not only did we come from a healthy community, but we also came from a very healthy family. We both had parents. My mother was a school teacher. She went and got her 4-year degree after she had 8 kids. And when I got into college, and it was her, I got into college, and she graduated soon after I started, and it's just, I don't have an excuse. We all have to graduate because if mom had 8 kids and went to college and finished, none of us could have any excuse. And so we just had to move forward and do it. And that really, I think, what set the stage for us. Even though I've tried to veer away from education, it pulled us back. Because at the end of the day, that's what I think our future is about, giving opportunities to these young people that don't ever have a shot. I mean, when I got to Stanford, I would pinch myself, to have an assistant deanship at Stanford. And I born and raised, and tomorrow when you look over the river and look at all those fields, and that's where I was born and raised in Jemez, and that's where I grew up. My farming, working with my grandpa, my uncles and my dad and my brothers, never knew what the world was like. We grew up speaking our language fluently. That was our first language, is our Jemez language. It wasn't until we went to Head Start that they began to teach us our, English. So when we come up, we were born, that was our world. And we're very fortunate today that our language is still very strong. And my grandson sitting over there in the con, wave your hand. He'll be dancing tomorrow. So we teach our kids. It's not a written language. It's an oral language, and that's what we speak to our kids every day. That's the only way we pass it down, and so forth. So we're very lucky today that our traditions, our ceremonies, our rituals, and all the things that make us who we are as Jemez people are still very much alive today. And you're very fortunate to be a witness to that tomorrow, because our prayers are for not only for us, it's for everybody that comes. When our war chief give the prayers the other night in the kiva, and thank the dancers and the singers, and also his prayer said, for all those whose paths will come to our village, may they be blessed. And you all will take these prayers and blessings with you to your homes. That's what our lives are about. So when we dance and pray in our Pueblo and Indian world, it's not just for us. It's for each of one of you. And I see, Secretary Warren here, former Lieutenant Governor from Santa Clara, who was the second Cabinet Secretary of Indian Affairs. But anyway, education, I did a lot of things early on, and then I started to run for the Senate, and I won. And I told Kevin, I said, I'm done with education. I said, now it's your turn. And he's done a phenomenal job in our village and what he's transformed. Right in front of us, to see all of that has happened today. And our new Head Start facility, a $6 million+ facility that's going up for early childhood daycare and Head Start. Hopefully all that will be ready to go next year and so forth. So it's been exciting to watch my younger brother do all the work, and it's exciting for our kids to grow up in that environment.
Thank you, Benny. Kevin, what do you want to add to that?
Well, you asked about Janet Reno, so I must talk about Janet Reno.
Yeah.
All righty.
Everybody know who Janet Reno? Yeah.
Okay, this was under the Clinton presidency.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
First woman attorney general.
Yes, and during that, when Clinton was in office, they had listening sessions, and somehow they ended up in Jemez at our Jemez Day School, and so they went through all the bells and whistles, and by the time it got to the Q&A part where we was able to ask questions directly of the Attorney General, they limited us a lot. So then she offered a challenge to our young people and the people of our community and said, don't let the conversation stop here. Bring your issues and concerns to us and we can work and address them. So at that time, we were working with a youth organization that we had established in Jemez called the Native American Youth Empowerment. So we followed up with the Janet Reno meeting, and we asked the kids, is there anything that you want to present? And so they said, yes, we have all these issues and concerns affecting us as young people. So we created a position paper. And around one of the things that they envisioned, some of the issues and problems and challenges that they saw, but things that they envisioned for themselves. And so we put that in a position paper, and then we asked them, okay, well, now we can send it to her and stuff. And we were having a meeting and discussing, and then one of the kids goes, well, let's run it up there. Everybody looks at, what? Well, let's run it up there. And we're like, okay, well, and he says, it's our traditional way of delivering things and communicating is long distance running. So we sat there and, okay, crisscrossing interstates with a bunch of youth. So in the end, we said, if that's what you want to do, then let's put our effort forward. So we met with our leadership, our council, our traditional leaders first, our caciques, and said, this is what the young people want to do. Can you support that? And when he said yes, then we went to the tribal council and the leadership and said, this is what we want to put forth, and put that challenge back on them and see what they can do to support us. So we organized a journey which took us over through 13 states, over 1,800 miles. No, 10 states in 13 days, or 13 states in 10 days. Anyway, we hand-delivered the message to Janet Reno and her office. We were met by then Representative Richardson at the steps of the Capitol, and we organized meetings with Janet Reno in her office. with the Department of Interior, the BIE, all sharing the message of the youth, and our youth were the ones to present the position paper, but not only theirs. Once the trip was started, they turned to our elders and said, what are your issues that we can also take? So from that effort, and Janet Reno actually said, we'll give you an hour of her time to you. We ended up leaving her office 3 hours later after our kids sat under her desk, met her chef, and toured the whole place in her office and that whole wing that she occupied, and she was so moved. And so from that effort came the initial funding to support a youth center that was built for our young people, and that was back in 1994. So.
Wow. It'll be interesting to see how many folks start running to DC now as a result from our network. I don't think the uptake's going to be that significant, but that's powerful. That is powerful. You want to add anything about the youth work? You guys started the charter. I mean, the charter school is a unique thing. No other tribe that I know of has created a charter school. I think there's the NACA schools here in Albuquerque, one of the best models for Native education in an urban context. But weren't you on the board, the original board? How'd the charter school get started out at Jemez?
It was a phone call from my daughter. I was at Stanford at that time as assistant dean of students, and my daughter decided to not go with me, and she wanted to stay in Jemez with my mom and dad because they wanted to graduate from the San Diego Mission School, which is a K through 8, was a Catholic school. And this is back in 1997, I believe. And so one afternoon, I got home, and my phone was ringing, so I picked it up, and it was my daughter. And this was in the fall after school started, and she was crying because they were just informed that that school that had been there for I don't know how many years, it opened in 1904, was going to close at the end of that school year. And I said, wow. And it kind of sent shockwaves to the community because it's the only Catholic school that was there. All the Hispanic families, everybody in that valley went to that school. Our former lieutenant governor of New Mexico went to that school. And our Secretary of Interior, Ken Salazar's mother, went to that school. I mean, it was just all these folks in that valley went to school, and they lived with the tribal members there and the families during the week because there was no busing. And so, and that's really what happened. And so, the next day I woke up and I went to my boss, the dean, and I said, look, I I think this is going to be my final semester at Stanford. And I said, well, what's going on? I said, did UNM get you an offer? I said, we'll counter offer, we'll match the offer. I said, no, it's not. I said, you can't match an offer. And I said, no, there's no job. I said, I got to go home. Stanford had, at that time, I think a $10 billion endowment. So I think they were okay. And I said, I told my boss, his name was, it's funny, he was an African-American, his name was Michael Jackson. He was. He was also the dean of students. He went after Stanford, he went to USC. It was funny when I was getting my job offer, I was staying with my mom's house for a while because I was in transition, and they would call my mom, and my mom would say, some Michael Jackson called. So we hung. I said, Mom, no.
Frank caller?
No, that's my job, Mom. I can't be hanging up on Michael Jackson. So that's really what happened. I mean, I came home. I had no pay. I had no job. At that time, the Catholic Church was still very active, and they was in a convento, and said, I go over there. I said, I'll volunteer, and I will raise money. So they set me up a phone, a computer, and I got going. And the Kellogg Foundation was the one that invested almost $250,000 to transition that school from a Catholic school to a community school. Intel Foundation, all these folks that I had kind of connected with over the years, I just called them all up.
Was that Valerie Johnson?
Valerie Johnson.
At Kellogg?
Yep.
I mentioned Valerie Johnson.
Yep. And so she was really the impetus for all this movement. And we ran it as a private school that first year. At that same time, we had a Republican governor that wanted to do vouchers for schools. And there was a big debate in the legislature at that time, and the only thing that they allowed him to do was to expand charter schools to 5 new schools. And that was what they gave him, and the legislature passed it. So this was in April. The governor signed the bill in March or April, and we were able to finish that one school year. And then we shut down as a Catholic school, and there was no application. I created my own application, charter school application. I just took the Senate bill, and I took all the provisions out, and I created my own application. And we shut down. At that time, I was the chair of the board for that at that time for Riverside. And so what I did is I just took the bill, read all the provisions, and created my own application. And in June of that summer, we went to the local school board, because they were the chartering authority under the new law, and they gave us our new charter. We had the buildings, we had the school, and we had the teachers, we had the students. All we had needed was money. So it was an easy, and so we shut down in the end of May, and in August, we opened as our first charter school in the state of New Mexico. Nobody could figure out how in the hell this little tribal community in the middle of nowhere how did you open a charter school in the first year? So the rest of them took them another year. So everybody was coming to Jemez to find out what was the secret. How do we do it? And I tell them the story. They're like, whoa. It's like, you just got to do it. I think there are times when you just can't wait. And our students couldn't wait, our teachers, our community. We just had to do what was available at that time, and we made it happen. And that was when it started back in 1997, 98. So we've been in operation for 20-some years in that school. And then, of course, Kevin later on started the high school. And both of those are still the only 2 charter schools on an Indian reservation in the state of New Mexico. And then, of course, we helped NACA launch in Albuquerque as well about a decade later and so forth. So
I didn't know that whole. Thank you. That's great. It's interesting, and Kevin, I don't know if you want to add to the charter, but it's interesting the thread of the last day, and you haven't been here, Benny, but you're hitting on all of it, which is the kind of connection between the power of transformation for an individual, the commitment to one's community. That it started with a call from your daughter, that it's about that individual. It's about a grandson who's over there playing video games and texting right now because he's heard Grandpa enough. But it's about the connection between an individual and a system and the toggle between those. And it feels like it's a real strength of your community and also of what we learned about. When we heard from Regis Pecos earlier today, we learned about how Regis is leading the charge in reinvigorating or keeping alive a real Pueblo-centric definition of leadership, a real deep definition of sovereignty. But he also knows how to make the legislature work for him, And I don't know if there's something in the water or there's something unique about the way you guys have done this, and a lot of other leaders, women too. I don't mean to be gender specific when I say you guys, and it's just compelling to me. And I wonder if part of that is because of the call to action, the call to duty, and I wonder if that's, when I think there's in your world when the tribe asks, it's not really an ask, right? It's a call, it's a calling, and I think that's what you were speaking to, Kevin, when you said I signed up for 1 year. So it's to me, it's an important lesson. I think it's a takeaway for all of us. Like, we got to work at the level of the individual and the system. But I also think it's something that you could teach us more about. So it's an invitation to help us learn our way into that. But Kevin, I don't want to miss your chance to weigh in on the charter or the call or anything else.
Just with the charter high school, I think that was tied to that actual community vision where they wanted their own high school. And so one of the first tasks that was given when I first came on board was to begin the charter for a new high school. And we thought, okay, we have the Riverside Charter School, K-8. How hard could high school be? But what the Riverside Charter School did was it brought about 150 kids from a private school system into the public school system. And what a new charter high school was going to do was threaten our high school with taking away kids. So it became a really interesting political battle between communities within our valley. And I think that really also taught us a lot. And, rather than the board embracing it, they denied us our charter when we initially put it through for the high school, based on that our focus on language and culture could be connotations of teaching religion in the public school, and that we were trying to create a segregated school. I don't know where they found their attorneys, but that was what they grounded their arguments on. And the tribe appealed to the state school board. And at that time, the state school board voted 12-1 to overturn the local board's decision and remand them to grant the tribe their charter. So that was another battle that we fought. And at that time, there was 4 of us working, and we were all recent college graduates. So we were determined to fulfill this vision of the community. And when we finally got the decision with our leadership up in Santa Fe, there was no applause. It was just like the words that our governor echoed back to us when the board gave their decision was, in our language, he said, Zia kwala ki hulita, meaning good. Now we've been opened up, like to be able to take a deep breath and like to move on. And then he said, let's meet at First and we can talk there. First cafeteria. That was our debrief session. Anyway, but as we're walking back to our vehicles, one of our staff members in the back was kind of just, I guess, thinking about all that had happened. And he was one of the ones that was not from our community, but working for us at the time. Then all of a sudden we hear him in the back and he goes, holy shit, we're starting a school. And we had worked on this whole vision, working with our community and our students and our education leaders, that now we had no facilities, we had no students, we had no board, we had no curriculum, we had no policies. So it was not the same as converting a charter school. Now we were building one from the ground up. And I think that gave us a whole nother perspective and experience. And when you look back now, I think if we knew what we were getting ourselves into, we would not have pushed forward. I think we would have doubted ourselves and our abilities. But it was that vision of the community that really drove us. And, one thing that because it was getting heated in our community, those communities that were for and against a new school, those that wanted to maintain ties to our Jemez Valley public schools, and families were against each other's, arguing for and against, and it was a really rough time for us. And one of our governors, I always remember this, because even the council was debating whether we should continue to move forward and support this. And what one of our councilmen said was, the law is open now for us to do this. At least let's put our foot through the door and keep that door open. Because if it shuts on us, we will never know if we could have done this or not. Then we will be asking ourselves, what if? Or we could have and we should have. And I think that was a profound statement that he made that really shifted the thinking of the council to say, well, let's move forward and keep that door open, not only for ourselves, but for other communities. And after that whole experience, then with the Riverside Charter School Board and the Wallatoa High Board, we worked with the New Mexico Charter School Coalition to amend the state law so that now the state is also a chartering authority, because we felt that we didn't want any other tribal community to go through the same experience that we did if they didn't have a positive relationship with their local school board. That through respecting and honoring tribal sovereignty, that they could charter a school directly with the state.
Fantastic. I don't want to not show the videos, but I know we're already way late. We can play them and let people. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. So let's open it up. If folks have questions, just raise a hand and we'll start to close it out, because I know it's been a long day and tomorrow's a big day. And we really appreciate you guys being here the day before the feast, so that means a lot. And shout out to the chefs who we know are back there cooking away, and much respect for them back at Jemez right now. And we know that those are the women, and we got to name that they are doing that work for us right now, and so I appreciate that. So I think the last thing is just, I know you've done a lot with COVID, post-COVID. I think it might be worth naming some of the ways you've thought about that. I think just we wanted to keep it a little light, so there is a verb that's been created here. I think Dr. Valerie Johnson created the verb to be shendoed. And it occurred to me that Kevin, when he signed up to start the charter school and then really realized how much work it was, he had shendoed himself. It is to be shendoed is to be brought along. And I'll give you an example of when I would hear it. I was working at a foundation in Seattle, and a colleague of mine who was working there, their phone came up on my phone, and I answered it. And it wasn't them, it was Benny at lunch with them, and he just said, "Steve, you've been shendoed." The next thing I knew, the foundation was thinking about making a grant to Jemez. So even though it was way out of strategy. So it's a beautiful thing. It's that you are leaders who bring others along with you. I think that's what the verb means. But you tell me. And I think it's really beautiful that Valerie Johnson, who invested more of Kellogg's money in Native communities than any grant maker ever, in any grant making place ever. She put $100 million into building Native higher ed, was the one who first said to me, "Careful, you'll be shendoed." So tomorrow we all get to be shendoed. But tell us a little bit about the COVID relief, and then if there are questions, please stand and we'll throw a mic your way. All right? Just how are you thinking about COVID? How did the tribe handle COVID, and what are some of the things that are coming out of that?
Thank you, Steve. And it was interesting, and I'll tell you two things that we did. We used our COVID dollars to pretty much clean up our entire our water system in our village, because these were pipes that were put in the 50s, 60s. Some were clay pipes, some had asbestos in them, and just a whole hodgepodge, through the Indian Health Service and so forth. So they didn't really have a flow. They didn't have any valve shut off. So I remember one time, in fact, the night before our feast day, when I was lieutenant governor in 2009, a semi-truck came to drop off some things and hit the cap, and we had to shut the entire village water system down the day before feast day, we can fix it. And oh boy, I tell you, man, everybody was like on us, but we couldn't find the valve. There was no valves and so forth. So fast forward, I said, okay, we came upon money. We're going to clean up our water system, set it so that we can haul all these things and so forth. But the other thing that we did that kind of sets the stage for what Kevin had done in 2015, 2016, they got the E-rate dollars for broadband into our library, community libraries and schools, BI schools. So we got about a $5 million, somewhere around $5 million from FCC to do that. And this is in 2015-16 time period. And I was a senator already. So, and then I became the tribal administrator. So I asked the council, I said, this work is going to be done. It's $5 million. The machine, everything's going to be. I said, I talked to the cable guys. I said, it's going to be about another $300,000 to throw in an extra conduit, an empty conduit in there. Can we make that investment? And we went back and forth. And at the end, the council, I said, at some point, we can't do this fiber that's coming is only for the libraries and the schools. We can't use it for economic development. We can't use it for anything other than what it's designed for through the E-rate. But if we can invest in an empty conduit, hopefully through my legislative appropriation, it might take me 5-6 years, but we might get there, sometime pretty soon, to get fiber to the community. And so they agreed. It was a huge investment. We're a small tribe. We have no gaming, and $300,000 was a lot. But we had one council member that had experienced this earlier, and he told the council, I said, remember you guys, in the 90s, we had this opportunity, we didn't take it. He said, I am not gonna make that mistake again. And so he really said, we gotta do this. We'll find the money somewhere, we have to scrape, whatever, let's do this because, this is the future of our kids. And so we did that, and fast forward to 2019, COVID hit. I mean, we came upon some dollars, and the council, we put in $4.5 million to put cable straight to our village, from downtown to Gigapop, straight to Jemez. And we were able to light up the whole village for folks to do remote working, school, kids. And today, everybody in the village has Wi-Fi. We've been in this. So, again, it was the education work that led that and initial investment by the tribe. And, we don't want to, I say, nobody wants to thank COVID, but if it weren't for COVID and those dollars would have never been available, we would not be where we're at in our community with our broadband and so forth. And now we're serving the entire valley as well. And then the tribe created another entity, a company, so that when this COVID is over, we will be our own internet service provider. So we're already training our own young people. The young ladies spearheading this organization, and they're stalling everything, they're doing everything. So when this thing's over, we will convert that into an enterprise, and we will do that for our own community, and we can teach our own kids.
That's great. You want to add anything, or? I mean, the one thing is that you're also doing the career technical education work and partner with Northern New Mexico College, and we talked about that earlier today. There was a panel about that. So tying it to career pathways. We got some ECMC Foundation support to help throw into that, and that's really exciting. I know we're way past time, and I know the young people if the young people are heading to the Healing Jam, they can please do so. Oh, it's here? So we got to wrap this. Any final questions? Because we don't want to get in the way of the, yes, is that Rashida?
Yes, it was.
Hi, Rashida. Dr. Govan.
Thank you. I don't want to hold y'all up, but I did have a question about the curriculum at your school. Because it's a charter school, I don't know, but are they beholden to the state curricular requirements? Are you able to really teach about your culture and heritage in the school? Because I think what I'm hearing in your discussion is because you're able to maintain your language, your culture, your organizing traditions, you're able to make like a tremendous impact. And I would really want to know more about how you're able to maintain that in the schools that you create.
Okay, thank you for that question. That's something that we've been actually working with and actively engaged in at the present time, the last year and two. So you heard that we chartered 2 schools, but they're still under state public school authority, so that unless we develop our own standards that are vetted through the whole system, we still fall under the Common Core state standards and the state assessments. Parents have the option to opt out with their kids, but what we've done with the charter schools is we've also have a language and culture curriculum that we've created. And so that is taught by our own educators. And working with the state and the tribes in New Mexico, there's the what they call the 520 licensure, where native language speakers are recommended by the tribes can be given a license to teach language and culture within the public school and charter school systems. And just this past legislative session, another bill was passed that they be compensated at the same rate as level 1 teachers. So that was a big win. So that's the avenue that we've been working on and maintaining the curriculum and instructional language and culture, utilizing our own research-based practices, working with our higher ed institutions that I mentioned earlier, and building that. But we also see limitations to that. So what happened in Jemez was we have our immersion that we're pushing from childcare to Head Start. And as we transition them into the elementary schools, we have BIE, Bureau of Indian Education, public schools, and charter schools that our kids transition into. But what we were seeing was, because the medium of instruction in all 3 of those is still English, is that all that they gained in the early childhood years, they were losing within a year to year and a half. And so we went to the council, and this past June, the council approved the establishment of a K-6 Jemez immersion pilot that we would grow by 10 kids a year. So then now we're creating what we envision as our own curriculum, our own standards, and our own assessments, not tied to any state or federal mandates, but that through this immersion approach, we can begin to build and grow what we want to locally, organically defined by us. And through this partnership, we worked with the University of Hawaii at Hilo, because they've been working with their Ahapunanaleo language immersion programs, their charter schools, and their public schools. And they have a Ku'o Viola teacher training program that they've built. And so we're partnering with them to develop a Jemez language immersion teacher licensure program. So rather than just having state licensure to teach language and culture within our public and charter schools, that we now have a pathway for our young people to be able to teach immersion all day, throughout the day, in our school systems that we're creating.
Wow. We could keep going, right? These guys have done so much deep work, but we get to go visit Jemez tomorrow. Rashida, you and Kevin should talk after. We got to make room for the young people. That's our jobs, and so I apologize to the youth that I took us too long, but we could keep going. But let's stop here and just say thank you to both of you from the bottom of our hearts for this work.